Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Model Kit Review. In today's fun review video, we'll be looking at the 1/48 scale Revell Supermarine Spitfire Mk.XVI. This kit was released in 2012 by Revell, and it actually contains the parts from the ICM Spitfire Mk.XVI that was released in 2001. This is Revell kit number 04661. In this video, we'll take a look at what comes in the box. We will go through the kit instructions, and we'll talk about any potential problem areas to watch out for during the construction phase of the build. We'll talk about the surface detailing on the exterior of the kit, and we'll also talk about the fit of the major parts. We'll look at the detail found on the smaller parts in the kit that make up the landing gear and the interior. We'll go through the color and marking guides and talk about the marking options that come in the kit, as well as the quality and performance of the decals themselves. We'll look at the clear parts on the kit, and we'll talk about the clarity and the fit of those. I'll mention any aftermarket parts that I plan to use during this build. And we'll also talk about how this kit compares to the competition from other manufacturers. If you like in-depth model kit reviews and model building technique videos, please consider becoming a member. Depending on the level of membership, members get perks like early access to new videos, bonus content, etc. Your support is very much appreciated, and it will help me to continue to make great model making content on this channel. A brief history of the Spitfire Mk.XVI. The Supermarine Spitfire Mk.XVI was externally identical to the Spitfire 9, differing only by the type of Merlin engine fitted. While the Mark 9 had a Rolls-Royce 66 or 70 power plant, the Mk.XVI used the American Packard Merlin 266 engine. This engine was rated at 1,705 horsepower. Production of the Mk.XVI commenced in September of 1944, with the first aircraft reaching number 443 Squadron of the Royal Canadian Air Force in January of 1945. All 1,054 of the Mk.XVI aircraft were built at the huge Castle Bromwich factory near Birmingham, with the last delivery taking place in August of 1945. The Mk.XVI was optimized for the low-level fighter-bomber role, and this version was typically fitted with the E-wing, having the long 20mm cannon barrels outboard of the 50 caliber machine guns. Spitfire 16s equipped 36 RAF squadrons, including 8 squadrons of the Royal Auxiliary Air Force after the war. The Merlin 266 engine gave a maximum speed of 405 miles per hour at 22,000 feet. One thing that you'll notice right off the bat when you start looking at these instructions is they are very busy. There are lots of optional steps or even options within steps, and you really need to slow down and take your time going through these instructions if you want to get a nice result. Before we start in on the construction phase of this build, we need to decide how we plan to finish out the build. You have the option of building this kit all closed up with the landing gear closed as well. You can build it all closed up with the landing gear in the open position. And then you have the third option of building it with the engine covers off to display the Merlin 266 engine, and you can also display the gun bays in the open position. If you choose to display the kit all opened up, steps 1 through 11 of construction have you assembling the well-detailed Merlin engine. All of these parts will take a little bit of tweaking and dry fitting to get precise fits, and this will add significant time to the build. Moving on to step 12, we're starting to add detail to the cockpit sidewalls. If you're choosing to open up the engine bay and the interior, you have to cut out some parts in this step of construction. In step 13, we're adding the engine and firewall assembly to the front of the fuselage as we close up the fuselage halves around that. If we're not adding the engine, step 14 just covers closing the fuselage around the forward firewall. Step 15 is for the closed up version, and in this step we're adding the exhaust to the kit. We're also adding the propeller shaft to the front of the aircraft. In step 16, we're starting the assembly of the interior of the aircraft. In this step, we're adding the pilot armor to the rear bulkhead. In step 17, we're adding the pilot seat and the rudder pedals and the control column to the floor of the aircraft. I don't think the shape of the seat is entirely correct on this kit. To dress up the interior on mine, I fabricated some seat belts from steering strip. In step 18, we're attaching the armor to the back of the seat assembly. In step 19, we are detailing out the instrument panel, and then we're adding that to the cockpit assembly as well as the gun sight. I painted this by hand, and I think it turned out really well in the end. In step 20, we're adding the cockpit assembly into the fuselage. In step 21, we need to decide what armament we're adding to the aircraft. There are 2 underwing bombs and then a centerline bomb that are optional. If you're adding those, you need to drill out the holes at this time. Step 22 is an optional step if you're displaying the wing gun bays open, and we're just adding the cannon and machine guns to the lower wing at this time. In step 23, we have the option of closing up the wing gun bays or leaving them open, and then we're attaching the upper wings to the lower wing. I deviated from the instructions here by gluing the upper wings to the fuselage first, and that allowed me to get a very good wing to fuselage fit, and it allowed me to work on that seam from the inside and the outside. Once that was dry, I added the lower wing to the underside of the fuselage. It took me a lot of time to get the wing gun covers to fit correctly in the holes, and really every step of construction on this kit, you'll need to do a lot of cleanup to the smaller parts. In step 24 of the instructions, we are adding the wing assembly to the fuselage, and we're also adding the wing tips. The wing tips on this kit seem much too bulbous on the ends, and what I did was glue them to the ends of the wings. Then I used a file to file them flat and shape them using the Eduard Spitfire Mk.XVI as a reference. In step 25, we're adding the rudder and tailplanes to the kit. On mine, I substituted these parts with parts that were left over from an Eduard Spitfire 9. In step 26, we're adding the tail wheel. In step 27, we are assembling the under-engine cowl and the oil cooler. It took some very careful dry fitting to clean up the seam, especially around the lip of the oil cooler. In step 28, we're just adding the radiator faces to the aircraft. In step 29, we're adding the radiator covers and ailerons and the lower engine cowl to the airframe. Once again, I spent a lot of time dry fitting these parts to get a precise fit of all of these once they were installed. In step 30, we're building the main landing gear. I flat spotted the tires on mine to get a more realistic sit when the kit is on the shelf. In step 31, we're adding the main gear to the kit, and we can position this in the open or closed position. Steps 32 and 33 cover the underwing armament on the kit. There are 2 underwing bombs and a centerline bomb included. In step 34, we're attaching those to the underside of the kit. In step 35, we're adding the upper engine cover and the gas cap and the clear parts to the kit. I found the clear parts to be of pretty decent quality. They were thin and relatively transparent, and with a little bit of dry fitting, I was able to get a pretty decent fit. I left the sliding canopy section loose so I can pose the canopy open or closed. In steps 36 and 37, we are assembling the prop, and then we are attaching that to the front of the aircraft, as well as the outer cannon barrels. Once again, careful dry fitting is really the order of the day. Moving on to the color and marking guides, there are 2 marking options included with this kit. The first one is for a number 421 Squadron Royal Canadian Air Force Spitfire Mk.XVI that was stationed in Germany in April of 1945. The second marking option is for a number 612 Squadron Spitfire Mk.XVI that was flown by the Royal Auxiliary Air Force. It was stationed in Scotland in August of 1949. Since I had an Aeromaster decal sheet for post-D-Day Spitfires, I decided to model a 485 Squadron Mk.XVI that was stationed in Fassberg, Germany in April of 1945. This aircraft was flown by Warrant Officer M.C.J. Lind. Looking at the kit decals themselves, I used the kit supplied stencils for this build and they perform flawlessly. I don't anticipate any problems with the kit supplied decals, although the yellow on the kit supplied decals looks a little bit too lemony and the red on the roundels looks much too bright to my eyes. Looking at the surface detail on the exterior of the kit, it's represented by engraved panel lines. The detail that is there is pretty consistent. And overall, I like the surface detailing on the exterior of this kit much better than that on any of the Airfix Spitfires that I have built. Looking at the fit of the major parts on this kit, even though I'm very happy with the end result, it seemed like every step of construction was a little bit of a battle to get everything to fit precisely. And what that adds up to in the end is a very long construction phase for this build. And that's only compounded if you open up the engine compartment and the wings on the build. In all fairness, Revell rates this kit as a 5 out of 5 on the difficulty level, and I honestly think that's an accurate assessment. If we compare the Revell/ICM Spitfire 16 to the Eduard Spitfire 16, the Eduard kit has much more extensive external engraving. I actually use the Eduard kit as a pattern to draw in some of the missing surface detail on this Revell kit. The fit of the parts on the Eduard kit is superb. Everything is very crisply executed, and it makes for a much speedier construction on the Eduard build. In addition, the color callouts in the Eduard kit are very well researched, and the decals in that kit are of excellent quality. In conclusion, though I'm really happy with the end result and this kit looks good on the shelf, I can't really recommend this Revell Spitfire 16 on any grounds except for low price if you can find one on sale. Otherwise, I would highly recommend the Eduard Spitfire 16. It's a much better product in every aspect, from clearer instructions to better researched color callouts, more precise fit, and better detail overall. Well, I'd love to know what you guys think. If any of you out there have built the Revell or ICM Spitfire 16, please let me know in the comment section below. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, model on.